Before I begin, I want to say that this is my personal story, my individual journey of faith. I have deep respect for Islam and all faiths. And I understand that millions find profound meaning and peace in Islamic teachings. This is simply one woman's experience, not a judgment on any religion or tradition. Listen carefully, because what I'm about to tell you might touch something deep in your heart. My name is Layla, I'm 68 years old, and for nearly 7 decades, I struggled with a spiritual emptiness that I couldn't understand or explain. But in one miraculous night in Barcelona, everything changed for me personally. You see, some of you watching this right now might be feeling that same restlessness I carried for 67 years, that sense that something is missing, even when you're following a faith tradition faithfully. If you're nodding your head right now, if something in my words resonates with you, then you need to hear my personal journey, because sometimes God calls us in unexpected ways. I was born in Detroit in 1956. Back when America still felt like a land of infinite possibilities. My parents, Allah rest their souls, came here from Lebanon with nothing but hope sewn into the lining of their worn suitcases. They brought their faith with them, that deep, unwavering Islamic faith that had sustained their families for generations. And from the moment I took my first breath, that faith was supposed to be mine too. But here's what I personally experienced with inherited faith. And I want to emphasize this was my own spiritual journey, not a reflection on Islam itself. For me, following the traditions I was born into felt incomplete, like there was something my heart was still searching for. For 67 years, I knelt on prayer rugs and followed the practices with sincere intention. But personally, I felt there was something more my soul was seeking. For 67 years, I recited prayers that were meaningful to so many others, but for me personally, they never filled that spiritual longing in my heart. My childhood was spent in the shadow of the Islamic Center on Schaefer Road. Every Friday, Mama would dress me in my best clothes, cover my hair with a white scarf that always felt too tight, too suffocating. Layla Habibti, she would whisper, adjusting my hijab with hands that smelled of rosewater and devotion. Allah is watching, always watching. But as I sat in those services, surrounded by voices raised in prayer, all I felt was watched, not loved, observed, not embraced. Do you remember being a child and feeling like you didn't quite fit anywhere, like everyone else had received some secret manual for living that you had somehow missed? That was my entire existence. At school, I was the Muslim girl with the strange name and the covered hair. At mosque, I was the one who asked too many questions, who never seemed to feel the joy that radiated from my mother's face during prayer. The years blurred together like pages in a book you're forced to read but never chose. High school graduation in 1974. College at Wayne State, where I studied accounting because it was practical, safe, predictable. Marriage to Hassan in 1979. A good Muslim man my parents chose, a kind man who loved me in the way he knew how. 2 beautiful children, Sarah and Omar, born in 1981 and 1984. A mortgage, a minivan, PTA meetings, and every Friday, that same Islamic center, those same prayers that felt like stones in my mouth. But life has a way of testing us, doesn't it? Hassan died of a heart attack in 2008, sudden and cruel as winter lightning. I remember standing at his graveside, surrounded by our community, everyone offering prayers and platitudes about Allah's will, about how Hassan was in a better place now. But all I felt was angry at a God I had served faithfully for 52 years, who had taken the one person who made my life bearable. Angry at a faith that offered no comfort, only obligations. The children grew up and moved away. Sarah to California with her tech executive husband, Omar to Texas with his oil company job. They called dutifully every Sunday, sent cards on holidays, but they had their own lives now. Their own struggles with faith and identity that they didn't discuss with their traditional mother. The house grew quiet except for the echo of my footsteps and the 5 daily prayers that had become as automatic as breathing. And then came retirement in 2023. 49 years of balancing books, of numbers that always had to add up perfectly, of a life lived in neat columns and tidy rows. I had started working right after college graduation in 1974, dedicating myself to my career while raising my family. Suddenly, after all those decades, I had nothing but time, and that growing sense of spiritual searching that seemed to expand to fill every quiet moment. That's when I made the decision that would change everything. Spain. I had always dreamed of Spain, ever since I was a little girl watching old movies with Mama on Saturday afternoons. The romance, the passion, the ancient cathedrals reaching toward heaven like stone prayers. Hassan had always said we would go someday, but someday never came. Now, with his life insurance money and my pension, I could finally go alone. My children thought I had lost my mind. Mama, you don't even speak Spanish, Sarah protested during one of our Sunday calls. What if something happens? What if you get lost? But I was already lost, had been lost for 67 years, at least in Spain. I could be lost somewhere beautiful. I booked a 2-week tour, one of those guided groups for seniors who want to see Europe before it's too late. Barcelona, Madrid, Seville, Granada, places that sang to my soul in languages I didn't yet understand but somehow recognized. The flight from Detroit to Barcelona, in October of 2023, was the longest flight of my life, not because of the hours but because of the weight of expectation. As we flew over the Atlantic, I pressed my face to the window and whispered a prayer, not in Arabic for once, but in English, straight from my heart. Please, God, whoever you are, wherever you are, show me what I'm supposed to do with the rest of my life. Barcelona struck me like a physical blow the moment I stepped off the bus. The light, that golden Mediterranean light that seems to bless everything it touches. The sounds, a symphony of Spanish voices, mixing with tourists from every corner of the world. The smells, coffee and orange blossoms, and something indefinable that spoke of centuries of faith and passion and life lived. Fully. Our tour group stayed at the Hotel Barcelona Center, a modest place near the Gothic Quarter. I barely noticed the room, the routine check-in process. All I wanted was to walk, to lose myself in those ancient streets that had witnessed so much history, so much human drama. That first evening, I wandered away from the group dinner, ignoring our guide's warnings about staying together. I needed to be alone, to think, to feel something other than the numbness that had become my constant companion. The narrow streets of the Gothic Quarter embraced me like old friends, their medieval stones still warm from the day's sunshine. And then I saw her. The Basilica de Santa Maria del Mar rose before me like a vision, its twin towers reaching toward a sky painted in shades of rose and gold by the setting sun. But it wasn't the cathedral that stopped me dead in my tracks. It was the statue in the small plaza beside it, a statue of the Blessed Virgin Mary, her arms outstretched in welcome, her face radiating a love so pure, so unconditional, that I felt my knees buckle. I had seen religious statues before, of course, but this was different. This wasn't art, this was presence, this was love made manifest in stone and bronze. Without thinking, without questioning, I found myself walking toward her, drawn by a force I couldn't name and didn't understand. The plaza was nearly empty, just a few tourists taking photos and an old Spanish man feeding pigeons from a paper bag. But as I approached the statue, the world seemed to fade away until there was just her and me, and this overwhelming sense of coming home after a lifetime of wandering. I stood before her for what might have been minutes or hours. I couldn't tell. Time had become elastic, meaningless. Her marble eyes seemed to look right through me, not judging, not condemning, just seeing all of me, the doubt, the loneliness, the 67 years of going through the motions of faith without ever truly believing. And instead of turning away in shame, she seemed to smile. That's when exhaustion hit me like a wave. The jet lag, the emotional overwhelm, the sheer weight of finally admitting to myself how empty I had been feeling. I made my way back to the hotel in a daze, barely remembering to eat dinner before collapsing into bed. And then came the dream. But this wasn't like any dream I had ever experienced. This was real. more real than reality itself. I found myself standing again in that plaza, but now it was filled with light. Not the golden light of sunset, but something purer, whiter, more beautiful than anything I had ever seen. She was there, but not as a statue now. She was alive, breathing, radiant, with a love that seemed to emanate from her very being. The Blessed Virgin Mary, the Mother of Jesus, stood before me in robes of blue and white that seemed to be woven from starlight itself. "Layla," she said, and her voice was like music, like water after decades of thirst, like the first warm day after the longest winter. "My precious daughter, you have been searching for so long." I tried to speak, to ask the thousand questions that crowded my mind, but no words would come. She stepped closer, and I could see that her eyes held depths of compassion I had never imagined possible. Not the distant, demanding gaze of the Allah I had feared for so long, but the infinite love of a mother who had waited patiently for her lost child to find her way home. "You have carried such sadness," she continued, reaching out to touch my face with hands that felt like pure comfort. "Such loneliness. You have tried so hard to believe in a God who felt far away, when all along, we have been right here, waiting for you to let us love you." The touch of her hand broke something inside me, some dam that had been holding back 67 years of tears, of frustration, of spiritual hunger that had never been fed. I collapsed to my knees before her, sobbing like a child, and she knelt with me, gathering me into her arms like the mother I had always needed but never had. "But I'm Muslim," I whispered against her shoulder, the words torn from the deepest part of my soul. "I was born Muslim. My parents, my husband, my whole life. Love has no boundaries," she whispered back, and I felt her tears mixing with mine. "My son came for everyone, Layla. Everyone. Your parents loved you the best way they knew how, with the faith they had, but love itself has been calling you home, and love will not be denied forever." In that embrace, I felt something I had never experienced in 67 years of Islamic prayer. I felt completely, unconditionally accepted. Not because of what I did or didn't do, not because of how perfectly I followed rules or rituals, but simply because I existed, because I was beloved, had always been beloved, would always be beloved. "What do I do now?" I asked, though I was almost afraid to hear the answer. "Listen to your heart," she said, pulling back to look into my eyes with that infinite compassion. "It has been trying to speak to you your whole life. Stop being afraid of what others will think, of what changes might come. My son's love is not a burden, Layla. It is freedom." When I woke up, my hotel room pillow was soaked with tears, but they weren't tears of sadness anymore. They were tears of relief, of recognition, of finally understanding what had been missing from my life for so long. I looked at the clock, 3:47 a.m. The city was quiet outside my window, but inside my heart, everything was singing, without hesitation, without doubt. I got dressed and walked back through those ancient streets to the plaza, where it had all begun. The statue stood exactly as before, her arms outstretched in eternal welcome, but now I could see what I had been blind to my entire life. This wasn't just art. This wasn't just symbolism. This was an invitation to experience the love of Christ, the same love that had reached out to me in my dream, the same love that had been pursuing me through 67 years of searching in all the wrong places. I knelt before her again, but this time it wasn't in confusion or desperation. This time it was in gratitude, in surrender, in the most profound homecoming of my life. "Jesus," I whispered, the name feeling strange and wonderful on my tongue. "I don't know how to do this. I don't know your prayers, your customs, your ways, but if you'll have me, if you'll teach me, I want to come home." The peace that flooded through me then was unlike anything I had ever experienced. I want to be clear. This wasn't about rejecting Islam or saying it was wrong. Islam is a beautiful faith that brings peace to millions. This was about finding my personal path, the way God was calling me individually. It was about understanding that my spiritual journey was leading me to Christ, and that this was my personal calling, my individual choice. I stayed there until dawn, talking to Jesus, to his mother, to the God I was finally beginning to understand. As the sun rose over Barcelona, painting the cathedral stones in shades of gold and rose, I knew that my life had been divided into two parts: the 67 years before this moment, and everything that would come after. The rest of my trip to Spain became a pilgrimage of discovery. I visited every cathedral, every shrine, every place where I could learn more about this faith that had captured my heart so completely. In Madrid, I lit candles for my deceased husband, asking Jesus to show Hassan the same mercy he had shown me. In Seville, I prayed for my children, that they would understand when I told them about my conversion. In Granada, I wept tears of joy as I realized that the Alhambra, that magnificent Islamic palace, no longer felt like home to me the way these Christian cathedrals did. When I returned to Michigan, everything looked the same but felt completely different. My house, my neighborhood, my entire life seemed like costumes I had been wearing for a role I never wanted to play. The first thing I did was take down the Islamic calligraphy from my walls and donate my prayer rugs to the local Islamic center. In their place, I hung a beautiful crucifix and a painting of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. The hardest part was telling my children. Sarah cried and accused me of betraying everything our family had stood for. Omar was angry, certain that some evangelical Christian had taken advantage of my grief and loneliness. They didn't understand that this wasn't about anyone convincing me of anything. This was about finally hearing the voice that had been calling my name my entire life. I found a Catholic parish, St. Mary of the Angels, just 10 minutes from my house. The priest, Father Michael, was kind and patient as I explained my situation. He arranged for me to begin RCIA classes, the program for adults who want to join the Catholic Church. Every week, I sat with a small group of seekers, learning about the sacraments, about the saints, about the rich tradition of faith that had been waiting for me all along. The process wasn't always easy. There were moments when I doubted myself, when I wondered if I was betraying my parents' memory, when I worried about losing the last connections to my old life. But every time I knelt before the Blessed Sacrament, every time I prayed the Rosary, every time I looked at that crucifix on my wall, I remembered that night in Barcelona and knew I was exactly where I belonged. My baptism was scheduled for Easter Vigil 2024, almost exactly 6 months after my trip to Spain. As that day approached, I felt like a bride preparing for her wedding. I had found the love of my life, and his name was Jesus Christ. The night before my baptism, I had another dream. This time, it wasn't just the Blessed Mother who came to me. Jesus himself was there, and he looked exactly like I had always imagined. Kind eyes that held the wisdom of the ages, gentle hands that had touched lepers and blessed children, a smile that conveyed both infinite compassion and perfect joy. "Welcome home, my daughter," he said, and those 4 words contained all the love I had been searching for my entire life. The baptism itself was the most beautiful moment of my 68 years. As Father Michael lowered me into that blessed water, I felt 67 years of spiritual emptiness wash away. When I emerged, gasping and laughing and crying all at once, I wasn't the same woman who had gone down. I was new, I was reborn, I was finally, truly alive. My children still struggle with my decision. They call less often now, and when they do, there's a careful distance in their voices that breaks my heart. But I pray for them every day, and I trust that the same God who pursued me for 67 years will not give up on them either. My old friends from the Islamic community have mostly turned away from me. The woman who used to organize Our Lady's auxiliary meetings no longer returns my calls. The family that lived next door for 20 years now barely acknowledges me when we passed in the driveway. It's painful, but it's also liberating. For the first time in my life, I'm living in truth instead of just going through the motions. These days, my life has a rhythm I never knew was possible. I wake each morning and begin with prayer, not the ritualistic recitations of my Muslim years, but real conversation with Jesus, sharing my hopes and fears and gratitude for another day of grace. I attend daily Mass when my arthritis permits, and even when it doesn't. I can feel the presence of God in my little house in ways I never could before. I volunteer at the parish food pantry, and there's something so deeply satisfying about serving Christ by serving his people. When I hand a bag of groceries to a struggling mother, I see Jesus in her eyes. When I sit with elderly parishioners who have no family to visit them, I feel Mary's maternal love flowing through me to them. The emptiness that plagued me for 67 years is gone, replaced by a fullness I didn't know was possible. I'm not saying every day is perfect, that I don't still struggle with loneliness sometimes, or worry about my children, or feel the aches and pains of growing older. But underneath all of that human struggle is this bedrock of peace, this absolute certainty that I am loved by the God who created me, died for me, and will one day welcome me home to heaven. I know some of you watching this might be struggling with your own faith journey. Maybe you were raised in one tradition but feel called to another. Maybe you've been going through the motions of belief for years without ever truly believing. Maybe you're carrying that same emptiness I lived with for so long, wondering if there's something more, something deeper, something real. Let me tell you this: it's never too late to listen to your heart. It's never too late to answer when love calls your name. I was 67 years old when Jesus found me in that plaza in Barcelona, and he changed everything. If he can transform a stubborn, set-in-her-ways widow from Detroit, he can transform anyone. The miracle of my conversion wasn't just what happened in that dream. As beautiful and real as that was, the real miracle is what has happened every day since, the way Christ has been healing the wounds of a lifetime. The way he has filled up all those empty spaces with his love. I'm 68 years old now, and I don't know how many more years God will give me in this life, but I know that however many they are, they will be lived in the fullness of faith, in the joy of knowing I am cherished beyond measure by the King of the universe. My dear friends, wherever you are watching this, from whatever country or culture or background you come from, know that you are loved, not loved conditionally. Not loved only if you're good enough or faithful enough or perfect enough. Loved absolutely, completely, eternally. That love has been calling your name your entire life, just as it called mine. All you have to do is be brave enough to answer. The God who met me in that plaza in Barcelona is the same God who is with you right now, wherever you are. He's not angry at you for doubting. He's not disappointed in you for struggling. He's been waiting patiently, with all the time in the world, for you to realize what I finally realized at 67 years old. You are his beloved daughter, his cherished son, and he has been pursuing you with his love since the moment you were born. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for letting an old woman share the greatest miracle of her life with you. And please, in the comments below, let me know where you're watching from. Are you in Spain, where my journey began? Are you in Michigan, where I'm learning to live as a new creation? Are you somewhere else entirely, feeling that same call in your heart that I felt for so many years? I want to pray for you, wherever you are, because if there's one thing I've learned in these past months as a Christian, it's that we're all family, all beloved children of the same Heavenly Father. God bless you, and may you find the same peace, the same love, the same coming home that changed my life forever in Barcelona.